with the audio devices.
Well, welcome back, everyone, on that note to Merge Conflict. And yes, Frank, Google is doing something funky with everything.
Is that a segue? I wasn't making fun of Google. I was making fun of Google. We have the worst Chrome luck with our USB-B mics, but that's right. Google is still making stuff, and we can talk about stuff they're making.
I do think we've been using Zencaster for about 450 episodes. Did you get your new cable yet? I'm getting mine tomorrow, I think.
No. You sent me the most ridiculous dongle picture I have seen. It is like the dongle pictures for the USB-C world. I've seen some bad video dongling before, but you were raving about your cool magnetic couplers for USB-C. But at the same time, it does look like a lot of dongling.
So if people don't know, I have these little magnetic USB. So they do make cables that automatically go into this, but you obviously need an adapter for your USB-C to then attach to this, right? So this little puppy here goes into your, if you're on YouTube, there's a little tiny itty bitty USB thing, and then there's like this sort of 24 pin, like little magnetic thing, and then the little adapter just magnetizes to it. Because what I do is I have my audio interface and I switch between computers, so I want to make it really seamless. So once I get the new cable, I will reduce the amount of adapters that are needed. Basically, I'll still need an adapter, but basically right now I have USB-A going into a USB-A to USB-C adapter, going into a USB-C to magnetic adapter, which then goes into a magnetic adapter to USB-C. So 1 conversion, 2 conversion, 3 conversion. 3 conversions.
3 dongles set up.
Yeah, 3. 1, 2. Yeah, there's a lot of things happening.
Okay, well, I hope that you'll be snapping away that cable all the time to make use of that fancy new feature.
I did, and I did it for this podcast. I was like, it was so satisfying. I was like, thanks.
Who needs
that
AliExpress?
Well, let's get into it. Our good friend MKBHD put out a video, and if our podcast is nothing but MKBHD commentary in 2025, then that's fine by me. Well, there's something that's been on my radar for a while as a mobile developer, which is the world of augmented mixed virtual reality. Now, we've talked many a times about 1 year ago to this date about, it's been like a year, visionOS. It's been a year. Pour one out for the homie.
Rip it off. Okay. Is it mobile? I guess it's mobile. A lot of mobile developers I know still aren't developing for the headsets, but I think that's just because they have it was always territory for game developers. But I think app developers are starting to be like, hey, it's kind of a cool environment. Let's put some apps on it.
Yeah, something new, different. Like I think when visionOS came out, I was intrigued, in general about it. I was like, okay, this is something, going on here. I did have to potentially at that point learn some new stuff of visionOS. There was a lot of geometry and physics happening, I think, in the world. And while cool, and there's a lot of stuff in the kit, I didn't really necessarily feel a want or need to open up visionOS inside of Xcode and play around with stuff. Although you published many apps at this point on it, and you're ingrained in this world.
I've written many apps. I've only published 2. I need to publish more. I need to get them off of my dev machine and into the store. But yeah, I actually we've talked about it a bunch before. I like it as a dev environment. It's fun. I've always been into 3D graphics, and I've always liked making graphics intensive apps. So now I have a great excuse to write graphics intensive apps. And you can write not graphics intensive apps for it too. You could totally write like a bank forms app, but I like to do all the fun graphics and take advantage of the 3D stuff.
Yeah, I think that with visionOS, it was Apple pushing forward into this space, and we've seen a lot of innovation stuff coming from, obviously Snap, from Meta, and now from Google pushing forward. The original OG with the Google Glass, if you remember back in the day,
Yeah.
and they announced a while ago. I don't know exactly when it was that it's basically a new operating system built on Android called Android XR, specifically made for these new emerging categories of devices. You think about, you have your Meta Quest. This is what MKBHD kind of goes. You have your Meta Quest running Horizon OS. You have your Vision Pro running Vision OS. And the question is, what does everything else run, right? And do you come up with 1,000 different operating systems and different app paradigms, things like that?
Yes.
And Google being Android, the universal operating system that can kind of run anywhere and do kind of everything on trying to be on every single device humanly possible. Of course, we would put Android on it. So Android XR, here we go. Now, what MKBHD talked about in his video is this new project collaboration, because Android XR and these new handsets are collaboration between Samsung and Google, which is very fascinating. Obviously, Samsung very deeply ingrained in the custom OS of Android. But that being said, you don't want a bunch of different flavors of his Android. You would have one base Android operating system that things can take, and you can get different headsets and do different things. So from a high level, the device that he was showing looked very, very similar to Vision Pro,
Oh yeah.
ran very, very similar to Vision OS, and so does Horizon OS, by the way, like the Meta Quest. There's a lot of similarities going on here.
Yeah.
But the difference is where the Meta Quest is pure virtual reality, right? You're not peeking out, those new glasses that they had were there. This one is much more, this reference device is much more of a Vision Pro, where you're looking out into the real world. The key differentiator that I want to talk about here isn't really the device, isn't really the operating system. To me, it's really the deep integration of AI
Oh
into
boy.
this thing. And
Ding.
you got to have that AI bell. We had a Miguel de Cosbel back in the day. We had that AI bell. If there's one thing to be said, there's one thing that you don't really want to do on your phone. If you have AI on your phone, you don't want to take out your phone and hold it up and do this whole blah, blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
right? What Marquez showed was so fascinating to me, which was that he was just looking at a book, looking at the world, looking at whatever. And he just asked Gemini to go there, to take that, to reorganize the windows, to do things in like agent-based stuff, and just
Yeah.
did it. And I was like, oh, wow, that's really fascinating. It was kind of Jarvis-y.
Yeah.
Like, oh, organize my windows, throw, empty the recycle bin, do that thing. And it does it in real time, a little slow, but it does it, in general. And I thought that was one of the better use cases I've seen recently. I've seen a lot of great use cases for AI, but I thought that was so fascinating that it's like, hey, we're not just creating an IDE that's infused with AI, but it's like, hey, we're creating this entire operating system that's there. And it has me thinking, is Apple behind? Like,
Okay.
is any of
Okay.
this
Enough.
stuff in the
Enough.
Vision
Okay.
OS? I want to talk. I want to unpack these things.
Okay.
Those are my high level thinking in there. I want to get your initial gut reaction of the Marquez video.
Unpack. Okay. That's a third thing. I want to unpack all of that stuff because I do want to go back to the hardware. We have to talk about the hardware.
Oh yeah.
It is just development hardware. But we'll talk about it. Then I want to complain about the Apple SDK,
Okay.
and then I will answer your question about the Marquez. So,
Perfect.
in that
Perfect.
order.
Okay. Cool. Let's start it off then.
Yeah, so it's a collaboration with Samsung. I don't know who's going to end up making it. Like you keep saying, like a Pixel class thing. I'm curious who would end up manufacturing it because it is like a pre-production unit and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And oh wow, did they really just copy the Vision? So whatever. It's goggles on your face. They're gonna look a certain way, but right down to like you have a cord attached to a battery thing that you got to put in your pocket, like. That's the form factor, I guess. I guess Apple nailed it, and everyone's just going to copy it now. Or maybe Quest got there first, whatever. Uh, so I do find it a little crazy. And then the OS itself, Android XR, looks fantastic. I it Looks a lot like visionOS. Good for them, though. I'm really hoping this thing's like half the price. I mean, that's the punchline I want to get to at the end because I don't know how much this thing costs, but it does look like you're getting a lot of the nice features, and it runs all the Android apps, so it has a lot of the nice flashy features and all that.
Yeah, even down to the interesting part about Android apps forever, and iOS apps have gotten a lot better to this extent, but Android apps for many, 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 many years now have really been designed and encouraged and forced to be flexible in many, many orientations and sizes, which lends very well to a desktop. Obviously, when you're resizing items, like Chromebook running Android apps, right, kind of forcing you to do that, but also in this setup. And I think, this sort of cloning is a very big compliment, even down to like when Marquez was resizing a window, right? It even had like that little curvature, thing. I was like, wow, yep, that's exactly
Copy
what
the
it looked
greats.
like. It's exactly, you nailed it. You nail the design. How do you improve that design? So yeah,
Well, honestly, I am curious about you brought up the AI stuff. We'll get to it. But like the window management because it's good on Vision OS, but I wouldn't call it great. There's still a lot of things, especially the difference between uh, games like immersive experiences and then content that actually fills your real living world, like 3D content
mm,
versus windowed content versus apps running in Windows. All those things behave in different ways, and the window management is different. So I think, like, oh, it's easy to put pretty pictures up on a nice looking device, but window management, that's hard. And so I'm
yeah.
curious to see how it handles that.
Yeah, definitely
Okay.
in that space too, because there's so many different items in there that you're gonna have to move around and play with, and different depths, right? That's one thing that we're not used to in all of we're in the real world. We're used to
Hmm.
depth, right? But we're not used to resizing windows and moving
Yeah.
things in and out, like at our desks to see it. Imagine if like your monitor, you had to like reach into your monitor and move things closer and farther away, and like it's just that Z dimension really gets you
Yeah.
to some fashion, and pinning also too. Like there's so many obviously unknowns in a very short 12-minute video to dive into. The things I want to know more about, just like when I put on the Vision Pro, like is it going to pin my memories of like where I'm at or what I'm doing? Like can I pin my desk setup, for example, right, and get there and I'm connected to a remote desktop and I'm doing something.
Yeah.
What happens when you boot up a game? Does it close all the windows? Does it do something else? He did show an immersive experience, I think, in YouTube that had multiple windows. So
Oh,
there was like two
sorry.
apps. Yeah,
Let me just sigh, the longest sigh possible there. The killer app missing on Vision OS is YouTube.
yeah,
And this thing's going to have YouTube. Of course it's going to have YouTube if it's on the Play Store.
yeah.
So, boy, I wonder how much it's going to cost. Anyway,
Well,
that's
it
just,
was
it's such a
cool.
killer feature
It
missing
is.
on.
It is because also like if you're doing live streams, you're doing comments, you're doing stuff, like there's all
Yeah.
these pop out windows. And what was cool about it was
Oh,
like you
yeah.
almost had like a pop up window and you had this going on. Then you could have immersive modes. If you were watching a show or a movie, you're like, imagine you were watching a Marquez video and Marquez, imagine YouTube. Like if YouTube goes down this rabbit hole, right? Imagine YouTube allows creators to upload immersive assets. So you could almost
Hmm.
watch a video from MKBHD and like in MKBHD's like studio. Like how cool would that be? You go watch us in our offices. That'd be fascinating.
Not the whole office. Part of it's a mess. I
Yeah,
don't
just
want
part
you
of
to
it.
see, you gotta
Yeah.
be able to clip the studio at certain points.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Um, I'm staying jealous about that YouTube. As someone who just published a video playing app, I wish I could have accessed YouTube videos. That would have been a really nice feature. Okay, can we talk? Can I complain about Apple SDKs now?
Sure. I'm ready. Hit me.
You mentioned AI, and I think that is definitely the coolest feature of this device. And immediately, the first demo Marquez did was a bunch of image analysis type stuff. Look at this thing, draw a circle around it, it pops into view, and then it does a search, whatever, vision stuff, like heads up display stuff, stuff you'd expect to be able to do in an
True.
augmented reality device.
Yeah.
And yet, does the Apple SDK give you any access to the cameras? Yes. It gives you a terribly cropped, tiny view of the world. That is not the 100 and whatever 80-degree panorama that the device is actually synthesizing and
Yeah.
registering. So I was just so jealous. Like, okay, they didn't announce. There's no announcements. He didn't talk about SDKs, so we don't know if if the Android XR SDK would give you that info either. But there is so much you can do with vision analysis and vision analysis that's already built into the Apple SDKs. So your last question to me, I don't want to fully wrap up with it, but is Apple behind here? Yes, but they don't need to be because they have this AI stuff. They have the well-established platform. They just got to get their act together and start pumping out some features, merging those two. So that's to answer your last question after a complaint. Now we can just go on and on about how cool all the AI features are on this thing.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that what they showed made sense, right? Like when you're watching and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh yeah, of
Yeah.
course you'd be able to do that. Like, yeah, why wouldn't you be able to do that, right? And it worked. I think it was even, I don't know if Marquez just happened to I don't know, because he did the demos for the Meta glasses too, but I think that they made him like, oh, here's our demo, right? They're like, oh, stand in front. This is not anything anyone would do. So like sometimes people create these fictitious AI scenarios. Like, hey, walk in front of this counter that has a bunch of food items on it and then ask it to make you a recipe. I don't know, there's like 7 ingredients here. I can figure out what the recipe is. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's what
Mix
I'm
them
saying.
together.
Whereas what Marquez did is he was like, oh, I'm going to look at this shoe. Oh, I see this shoe. Like, okay, like go find me this shoe. Oh, I'm reading this book. Tell me where this is at. And can you take me there in Google Earth? Right. And then zoom me in to an
Yeah.
immersive experience. And you're like, oh, that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like that was pretty neat about it. And Google's really leaning into that circle stuff. Just really circle stuff. I don't know, circling stuff in the air
Yeah.
is kind of cool. Just like, yeah, I'm circling it up,
I
so neat.
I love the circle stuff. I think that's a very intuitive UI. I
People
mean,
get
it's
it.
better to say point at, but I guess our point at technology is not good enough yet. We have circle at.
Yeah.
Um, but I thought it was also a fantastic showcase. They keep calling it Gemini. I don't know what version of Gemini it is, but of basically an AI doing user interface automation. So still running everything through the user interface, but taking actions for you, like proper automation. And that's exciting. I know Microsoft is integrating that stuff into Windows. I don't know if they've even gotten to that level of automation though. Like right now it's easy because they're controlling all the apps and they can control all the endpoints and they can make sure everything works together. Who knows how it's going to work with third-party apps and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I'm excited for this AI automation future. There might be something to this AI stuff.
I was thinking the UI automation stuff in general, like they could go so much further because he was saying it can control apps, it can do stuff. Like ideally, if it has screen reader capabilities, it can see the thing. It should be able to scroll, click. I should be able to look at Apple Music and say, "Oh, play James's Station." Right? Why do I have to take my mouse? Oh,
Ugh.
volume up, volume. You know what I mean? Like I know that there are these capabilities. I'm sure there's extensions you can do this, but really, what you do want, and I think the intriguing part. Now, of course, you have to enable, to keyword the Gemini or enable the Gemini stuff. Is you do kind of want something just there, you know what I mean? On like Jarvis, right? You kind of just want Jarvis there, like, hey Jarvis, like let's start the recording in 5. Imagine, so I caught Frank off guard because I drug my mouse over to the start button, record button, hit the record. But imagine, Frank, I was like, start the recording in 5 seconds, right? And then it would just do it, right? Boom, 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 right? And imagine it got so smart that the system knew that every time we ended the show, the 8,000 bajillion same times that we do it, it could like stop, right? I'm just saying, I was talking to someone today about it, and this is what intrigues me about it. I was talking to one of my teammates. I said, and you and I have talked about this. Everyone says, "Oh, I'm so fatigued about AI." No, you're not. No one, people aren't even, they're not even, people might be sick of it because it's like in our faces, but it's for
Mhm.
awareness, right? And it's going to continue to push forward. And I've changed my angle a lot as you see me progress, right? Only because the things that I do and the things that I'm using, it's just aiding me more and more way. But you almost just want it to be ubiquitous, right? I think the first time we saw IntelliSense, right, or IntelliCode, and it was completing our lines and it wasn't scary, it wasn't ubiquitous, right? We just got used to the flow of it, right? We're getting used to that with Copilot and chatting, going
Mhm.
back and forth. And we'll hopefully get used to that in other things. And that's what this XR thing was just like. I am just living and I'm just speaking and it is just doing and it's
Yeah.
helping. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like I remember the demo from uh I think the early 4.0 days, 4.0, not zero, but
Yeah.
4.0,
Oh,
where
little O.
they were playing Minecraft and it was like an assistant on Windows, like helping them play Minecraft and understand, like, I've never played this game. Like, how do I do this thing? And it's like, it's reading this and you're just having a buddy, right? A co-pilot next to you. And that's where I saw this, and I was like, okay, like I'm starting to see some cool things. Now, some people may look at that and say, oh, that's really creepy, but obviously you are granting permission, you're having some faith in Google. And I do think that because it's Android, I think when we go to the API level and you talk about the Apple SDKs, I have a, I have a sneaky suspicion that the Android ecosystem is going to be much more open for people to get much more access as long as
We'll
it's
see.
granted. As long as it's granted, right?
Hope you're right. Yeah, and I think that's always going to be the trick with these AI automation things. Hopefully, you're containing it to whatever's visible at least, or maybe even less than that. Maybe even just certain apps and things like that. Um, so I had a lot of great thoughts about AI integration, but like all I keep getting back to is, isn't it funny that, or isn't it obvious that the VR, AR realm is like a place where these AIs can be good? It turns out
Yeah.
cyberspace is a place because you're talking about making voice commands to the thing. I have the Amazon Dingus, and honestly, it gets kind of tiring doing the voice commands. I don't want to say volume up, volume down all the time. Uh, what you want is something with a richer context. And that context is, what am I looking at? What apps are in front of me? And ideally, some gestures, like if I'm just like, if I go like this, like maybe lower the volume, who knows? And that's not limited to cyberspace or VR. Like we could put cameras on all of our dinguses, but that's a little creepy. I feel like it's almost more safe to, in that when I have goggles on, okay, now it's okay for you to track my hands and do these kinds of things. And we can provide it the richer context and just more ways than just talking to it. I don't, I am a little bit AI overdosed on chat AIs. And that's starting to get to talking to them. Just like, okay, I got to explain so much. I wish they would just keep a running context of my life, all the projects I've ever worked on, and they are getting better at all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But um, yeah, I just think that the VR world's going to be a good place. I hope the quiet down gesture works someday.
Yeah. I really do think like what you said is important, is the contexting window of what it knows and what it sees. And if there's sort of keywords or sort of key things that we end up saying, like, remember this, right? Imagine
Hmm.
you're checking into a hotel or an Airbnb and you have a code, or you need a code to the door. Like, hey, remember this code to the door. And it's just like, okay, cool, got it. Right. And it's
Hmm.
just like a mental note instead of you writing it down and doing something, right? Or, like, hey, I'm packing my bag, memorize everything I'm packing right now. And it's just like, it's like, okay, cool. You know what I mean? Some of those things, like you're kind of just like telling it to hit the record button and go. You know what I mean? And you could ask questions about what you did and how you did and XYZ. Like, oh, did I do this stuff? I think that could be definitely of interest. But I do think you're right. Like when you're entering this world of the glasses and the thing talking to you in your ear and all that stuff. You're sort of entering this scope that's there. But the context window is super important. I've been using a lot of uh, M365 Copilot. So at work, right, if I'm using Teams and Word and Office and all of our documents, all the things, it has the context of everything I've ever done at work for 9 years. There's all this, every email, the stuff, all these things, right? It
Crazy.
knows. So how often are you like searching your inbox, for example, for something, and you're like, oh, I've gotten this thing and blah
I
blah
don't
blah
even
and this thing.
try.
Yeah, it's impossible, right? Because you're just looking for keywords and this stuff. So I'd go to my M365 Copilot and I said, oh, I'm pretty sure I talked to Golnaz about 2 years ago about this topic. Can you go summarize, blah blah blah, and who I was talking to in that context? And it's like, here you go, right? It can go figure it
Dang.
out. It's just like so
Yeah, pretty
smart.
good.
Yeah, it's like so good. And it's not just like giving me a link to an email that I have to go parse. It's like, oh, let me just go find the information. Like I was just on there. I was like, uh, we're prepping .NET 10 stuff. And I was like, oh man, who's the WPF person? I was like, oh, I'm like, it's at the tip of my tongue. And I'm like, I know I could go search WPF and I got to have my 1,000 emails. I said, give me a
Who's
list
that
of
WPF person?
yeah, I was like, give me the list of the last 5 people I communicated with and talked about WPF. And it's like, cool, I got you. It's like, oh, yep, there it is. Perfect, nailed it. And it's like, I got the context windows though. And that is that magic moment, right? When the context window is your entire solution, right? In Copilot, it's your entire history, right? Or it is our lives to some
or,
extent. Who has that data? I don't know. That's the only problem.
or back to the headsets. At least what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Like, just that's my context, buddy.
Yeah.
Like, oddly enough, I get into a space where I'm wearing the AR goggles, but I'm still looking at a computer monitor. It'd be nice if it would read the stuff on that monitor and
Yeah.
do interesting things with it, but not yet. So to summarize, these look like awesome goggles that may or may not ever come out. I hope they do come out.
Yeah.
How expensive do you think they are going to be?
Well, Samsung did say they want to ship them this year. These are obviously prototypes that can change and evolve. I do think it'd be cheaper. I bet, 1,500.
Wow. At 15, I might try them.
And I bet that'll be referenced. And I bet you might even see an entry level $1,000 one.
I would definitely try them.
Mm-hmm.
It's I'm afraid of the API that they're going to expose because at least in Apple's case, they threw out a lot of old APIs and introduced whole new stuff. I'm curious what Google's standpoint is going to be.
Yeah. It'll be fascinating to see. I know you can go over to android.com/XR. There are some things that you can sign up for, like developer things and input on it, XYZ. They have like a whole developer.android.com/XR. So you can look at apps. Right now, it says it supports Jetpack, which would be like their Compose, like XR. They have Unity support. It says OpenXR, WebXR. So it's different technologies, whatever this XR. I don't know if
WebXR is nice.
XR, yeah.
One thing that annoys so many things annoy me about Apple. The Web VR is supported by Apple, but not WebXR. It's one of those weird things.
Yeah. So that's where they're at right now. It's a pretty minimal page, I would say, in general, but they have a whole XR SDK, so you can go dive into it if you really, really want. I'd be interested, and that's what they said. That you got OpenXR, Unity, Jetpack XR, WebXR in there. And I mean, you look at these photos, man. Like they're not. I'm looking at this documentation, man. It looks like I read this documentation about a year ago.
What, you read it a year ago?
For visionOS. I mean, it looks so similar.
Oh,
It's so
yeah.
similar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a
Spatial
whole
panels.
new windowing system, or is it just classic Android activities
So
and fragments and all that?
what they say is there's 3 modes. There's XR compatible mobile app, so it's just your mobile app, no changes required. XR compatible large screen, so you optimize for large screen, kind of, you know what I mean,
Okay.
like iPad. Yeah. And then there's XR differentiated app, which takes advantage of 3D models, spatial panels, and spatial environments. And you can do 2D or
Spatial
3D
panels. There it is.
spatial
Okay.
panels. Yep. I mean,
That's what they call them.
if you look at let me pop this puppy in our Zencaster here. I mean, it looks pretty straightforward. I mean, I don't know. I just create a spatial panel content and then like put a box in it, put text in it. I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know.
It
Looks okay. They have like a grid
I like
system
the
too. Yeah.
object in a volume, but then it's still in a window. So it's an object in a volume in a window.
In a window.
I got to get
Yeah.
their names right.
Yeah. So,
I don't
you
know. It
create.
looks kind of fun. I think I need to invent a new language that makes cross-platform XR apps because I ain't writing 2 different versions of the same app.
Depends what APIs you get available to. I don't know. If anyone's played around with this, let us know. Go over to our YouTube, youtube.com/at mergeconflict.fm. You can, of course, write to us at mergeconflict.fm. The website, there's a contact button. But yeah, I'm interested if anyone's played around with it. I mean, obviously there are whole industries that are immersed in the, this space already if people are playing around with it. But yeah, it's out there, man. It's happening. So it's cool. I'm in.
Get on board.
I guess I'm on board. I don't know. I wasn't like a pure believer
Here,
before, but
okay.
I'm intrigued.
You're trying to wrap it up, but let me just ask: was there a killer app in all that demo to you?
YouTube.
It
No.
is. No, it is. I'll grant that. YouTube
That's
does work on visionOS. You just have to put it in the browser, and the browser is
yeah.
annoying. That's all.
I think that what he didn't show is like remote desktoping into a machine. I think
Right.
the killer app that they showed is Gemini, which is the OS. Like that's the
Yeah.
killer app so
Yeah.
far, which was
It's not an app
intriguing.
though.
But it's
That's
not an
the
app.
OS.
That's the
Yeah.
problem. So beyond that, it was just a lot of Android apps. So I would say, is it just an Android tablet strapped to your face, right? And that's the age-old question. Like, are we going deep on stuff? So I'll be fascinated to see if it goes deeper than that. But yeah, it's a great question to ask. Like, do you need one of these? I don't know. What's the killer app? I don't know. Well, I don't know. Do I need
Yeah.
it? Hard to say. So yeah, we'll see.
TBD, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay. Good
All
enough.
right. Well, there you go. There's our XR
Extravaganza.
extravaganza. Ooh, XR extravaganza with Android XR. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this week's Merge Conflict. So until next time, I'm James Magno.
And I'm Frank Kruger. Thanks for watching and listening.
Hey, Gemini, hit stop.